Book of Heaven, Volume 12, Part 7. August 12th, 1918. The predominant passion of Luisa. That Jesus free her from the bother in which his will put her. Why Luisa must take food. Continuing in my usual state, I was thinking to myself that if the Lord wanted a certain thing from me, he should give me a sign, and it was that of freeing me from the coming of the priest. And blessed Jesus made himself seen in my interior with a ball in his hand, as though in the act of throwing it to the ground. And then he told me, "My daughter, this is your predominant passion, that I free you from the bother in which my will put you. I keep you in this state for the whole world, and I use you so as not to send it to ruin completely, while this other thing with which you could do good is a small part. And my Jesus, I am unable to understand this. You keep me without suffering. It seems that you keep me suspended from the state of victim, and then you tell me that you use me in order not to send the world completely to ruin? And Jesus, yet it is false that you do not suffer. At the most you do not suffer such pains as to be able to disarm me completely. And if sometimes you remain suspended, your part, your will, is not in it. But here your will would enter. You cannot understand the sweet violence you do to me with your waiting. Feeling suspended, not seeing me as you used to, and remaining at the same place, without moving in anything. And besides, I want to be free over you. Whenever I please, I shall keep you suspended. When I don't, I shall keep you bound. I want you at the mercy of my will, without your will. If you are content with this, you can do it. Otherwise, no. Another day I was feeling ill, with the continuous throwing up that I do, and I was saying to my sweet Jesus, what would you miss by giving me the grace of not feeling the necessity to take food, to the point that I am forced to bring it up? I say this to obey. And my lovable Jesus told me, "My daughter, what are you saying? Quiet, quiet. Don't say this any more. You must know that if you had no need of anything, I would let the peoples die of starvation. But because you need it, since it can serve your necessities, I, for love of you, and because of you, give the necessary things to creatures. So if I listened to you, you would want harm for others. On the other hand, by taking food and then bringing it up, you do good to others, and your suffering glorifies me. Even more, how many times, while you throw up, I see you suffering, and since you suffer in my will, I take that suffering of yours, I multiply it, and divide it for the good of creatures. And I enjoy and say to myself, this is the bread of my daughter that I give for the good of my children." August 19th, 1918. Jesus is tired of the vile deeds of priests. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus made himself seen in my interior, as though within a circle of light, and looking at me, he told me, Let's see. What good have we done today? And he looked and looked. I believe that that circle of light was his most holy will, and that since I had united myself to his most holy will, this is why he was saying so. And he added, "Anyway, I am tired of the vile deeds of priests. I can take no more. I would want to have done with it. Oh, how many devastated souls! How many of them disfigured! How many idolatrized! To use holy things in order to offend me. This is my most bitter pain. It is the most execrable sin. It is the mark of the total ruin that draws the greatest maledictions and breaks any communication between heaven and earth. I would want to eradicate these beings from the earth. Therefore chastisements shall continue and shall multiply. Death shall devastate the cities. Many houses and roads shall disappear. There shall be no one to live in them. Mourning, desolation shall reign everywhere." I prayed him and prayed him again, and having remained with me for a good part of the night, he was so much in suffering that I felt my heart break for the pain. But I hope that my Jesus shall placate himself. September 4th, 1918. Laments of Jesus because of priests. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus came for just a little and told me, "My daughter, creatures want to challenge my justice. They do not want to surrender, and therefore my justice does its course against the creature. And these are from all classes, excepting not even those who are said to be my ministers, and maybe these more than others. What poison they have, and they poison those who approach them. Instead of placing me in souls, they want to place themselves. They want to be surrounded, be known, and I remain aside. Their poisonous contact, instead of recollecting souls, distracts them from me. Instead of rendering them withdrawn, they render them more free, more faulty. So much so that one can see souls who have no contact with them being more good, more withdrawn. So I cannot trust anyone. I am forced to allow that the peoples go far away from churches, from the sacraments, so that their contact may not poison them more and render them more evil. My sorrow is great. The wounds of my heart are deep. Therefore pray, and united with those few good who are left, compassionate my bitter sorrow. September 25th, 1918. Office of Victim. I was very afflicted, and I felt a force in my interior of wanting to go out of my usual state. Oh God, what pain! I felt a mortal agony. Only Jesus can know the torment of my soul. I have no words to express it. Or rather, I want Jesus alone to know all my pains. Therefore I move on. Now, while I was swimming amid bitternesses, my always lovable Jesus, all afflicted, came, and placing one of his fingers on my mouth, told me, "I have made you content. Be quiet. Don't you remember how many times I showed you great mortalities, cities depopulated and almost deserted? And you told me, no, don't do this. And if you want to do it, you must allow them to have the time to receive the sacraments. And I am doing this. What else do you want? But the heart of man is hard. He is not completely tired. He has not yet touched the summit of all evils, and therefore he is not yet satiated, so he does not surrender, and he looks with indifference even upon the epidemic. But these are the preludes. It shall come. The time shall come in which I shall make this generation, so malignant and perverted, almost disappear from the earth. I was shaking in hearing this, and praying. I wanted to ask Jesus. And what should I do? But I did not dare. And Jesus added, what I want is that on your part, you do not dispose yourself to doing it, although being free, you can do it. I want you at the mercy of my will. In these past days, it was I who pushed you to go out of your usual state. I wanted to widen the scourge of the epidemic, and I did not want to keep you in order to be more free. October 3rd, 1918. How justice must balance itself. I was praying, blessed Jesus, that he would placate himself, and he came for just a little, and I said to him, my love, Jesus, how awful it is to live in these times. Everywhere one hears tears and sees pains. My heart bleeds, and if your holy will did not sustain me, I certainly would not be able to live any longer. But oh, how much sweeter would death be for me. And my sweet Jesus told me, my daughter, it is my justice that must balance itself. Everything is balance in me. However, the scourge of death touches souls with the imprint of grace, so much so that almost all of them ask for the last sacraments. Man has reached such extent that only when he sees his own flesh being touched and feels himself being undone, he shakes himself, so much so that others who are not being touched live lightheartedly and continue the life of sin. It is necessary for death to harvest in order to remove many lives that do nothing other than make thorns sprout beneath their steps. And this in all classes, secular and religious. Ah, my daughter, these are times of patience. Do not become alarmed, and pray that everything may abound to my glory and for the good of all. October 14th, 1918. True peace comes from God. The greatest chastisement is the triumph of the evil. Continuing in my usual state, full of bitternesses and of privations, my sweet Jesus came for just a little and told me, my daughter, governments feel the ground missing under their feet. I shall use all means to make them surrender, to make them come back to their senses, and to make them know that only from me can they hope for true peace and lasting peace. So now I humiliate one, now another. Now I make them become friends, now enemies. I shall do all sorts of things to make them surrender. I shall make their arms fall off. I shall do things unexpected and unforeseen in order to confound them and make them comprehend the instability of human things and of themselves, to make them comprehend that God alone is the stable being from whom they can hope for every good, and that if they want justice and peace, they must come to the font of true justice and of true peace. Otherwise they shall achieve nothing. They shall continue to struggle. And if it seems that they shall combine, it shall not be lasting, and the brawls shall start again more strongly. My daughter, the way things are, only my omnipotent finger can fix them, and at the appropriate time I shall place it. But great trials are needed, and shall take place in the world. Therefore it takes great patience. Then he added with a more moving and sorrowful tone, My daughter, the greatest chastisement is the triumph of the evil. More purges are needed, and the evil, in their triumph, shall purge my church. And then I shall crush them and scatter them like dust in the wind. Therefore do not be troubled at the triumphs you hear, but cry with me over their sad lot. October 16th, 1918. He predicts wars and the lot of some countries. I was feeling very afflicted because of the privation of my lovable Jesus, and my mind was gloomed by the thought that everything in me had been either the crafting of my fantasy or of the enemy. Rumors circulate of peace and triumph for Italy, while I remembered that my sweet Jesus had told me that Italy shall be humiliated. What pain, what mortal agony to think that my life was a continuous deception. I felt that Jesus wanted to speak to me, and I did not want to hear him. I rejected him. I fought for 3 days with Jesus, and many times I was so exhausted that I did not have the strength to reject him. And then Jesus would speak and speak, and I, drawing strength from his speaking, would say to him, I don't want to know anything. Finally, Jesus surrounded my neck with his arm and said to me, Calm yourself, calm yourself. It is I. Listen to me. Don't you remember that months ago, as you were lamenting to me for poor Italy, I said to you, My daughter, those who win, lose. Those who lose, win. Footnote. This was from Volume 12, November 2nd, 1917. Italy, France have already been humiliated, and won't be again until they are purged and have returned to me, free, independent, and peaceful. In the triumph merely apparent that they enjoy, they already suffer the greatest of humiliations. Not themselves, but a foreigner, not even European, came to drive the enemy away. So if this could be called a triumph, that it is not. It is of the foreigner. But this is nothing. Now, more than ever, they lose more, in moral things as much as in the temporal. because this shall make them dispose themselves to committing greater crimes, to fierce internal revolutions, such as to surpass the very tragedy of the war. And besides, what I told you did not regard only the present times, but also the future. And what shall not happen now, shall happen then. And if anyone shall raise difficulties and doubts, it means that he knows little about my way of speaking. My speaking is eternal, as I am. Now I want to tell you something consoling. Italy, France now win, and Germany loses. All nations have some black stains, and all of them deserve humiliations and crushings. There shall be a general uproar, confusion everywhere. By the sword, by fire, and by water, by sudden deaths, by contagious diseases, I shall renew the world. I shall make new things. The nations shall form a sort of Tower of Babel. They shall reach the point of being unable even to understand one another. The peoples shall rebel among themselves. They shall no longer want kings. All shall be humiliated, and peace shall come only from me. And if you hear them say peace, it shall not be true but apparent. Once I have purged everything, I shall place my finger in a surprising way, and shall give the true peace. And then all those who are humiliated shall return to me, and Germany shall be Catholic. I have great designs upon her. England, Russia, and every place where blood was shed, shall rise again to faith, and shall be incorporated into my church. There shall be the great triumph and the union of peoples. Therefore pray, and it takes patience, because this will not be so soon, but it shall take time. October 24th, 1918. The soul must invest herself with Jesus in order to receive him in the sacrament. I was preparing myself to receive my sweet Jesus in the sacrament, and I prayed that he himself would cover my great misery. And Jesus told me, "Daughter, in order for the creature to have all the necessary means to receive me, I wanted to institute this sacrament on the last day of my life, to be able to line up my whole life around each host, as preparation for each creature who would receive me. The creature could never receive me if she did not have a preparing God, such that, taken only by excess of love, for wanting to give himself to the creature, and she being unable to receive me, the same excess of love led me to give my whole life in order to prepare her. So it placed my steps, my works, my love before hers. And since in me there was also my passion, it placed also my pains to prepare her. So invest yourself with me, cover yourself with each of my acts, and come." Afterwards I lamented to Jesus because he no longer makes me suffer as he used to. And he added, "My daughter, I look not so much at the suffering, but at the good will of the soul, at the love with which she suffers. Because of this, the smallest suffering becomes great. Trifles take life within the all and acquire value. And the lack of suffering is stronger than suffering itself. What sweet violence it is for me to see a creature who wants to suffer for love of me. What do I care if she does not suffer? when I see that not suffering is for her a nail more piercing than suffering itself. On the other hand, lack of goodwill, things that are forced and without love, as great as they might be, remain small. I do not look at them. On the contrary, they are a weight for me. November 7th, 1918. The soul who does the divine will imprisons Jesus. Finding myself in my usual state, I was saying to my sweet Jesus, if you wanted me to go out of my usual state, how is it possible that, after so much time, you don't make me content? And he told me, daughter, the one who does my will and lives in my volition, and not for a short time, but for a period of her life, forms as though a prison for me in her heart, totally and fully of my will. So as she kept doing my will and tried to live in my volition, she raised the walls of this divine and celestial prison, and I, to my highest contentment, remained imprisoned inside of it. And as she absorbed me, I absorbed her into myself, in such a way as to form in me her prison. So she has remained imprisoned in me, and I in her. Hence, when the soul wants something, I say to her, you have always done my will. It is right that sometimes I do yours. More so, since this soul living of my will, what she wants can be the fruit, the desire, of my own will that lives in her. Therefore do not worry. When it is necessary, I shall do your will. November 15th, 1918. How one can live at the expense of the sanctity of Jesus. I was thinking, what would be better, to think about sanctifying oneself, or to occupy oneself only before Jesus, with repairing him, and to seek at any cost, together with Jesus, the salvation of souls? And blessed Jesus told me, my daughter, the one who thinks only of repairing me and of saving souls, lives at the expense of my sanctity. In seeing that the soul wants nothing other than to repair me, and echoing my inflamed heartbeat, she asks me for souls. I see in her the characteristics of my humanity, and taken by folly toward her, I make her live at the expense of my sanctity, of my desires, of my love, at the expense of my strength, of my blood, of my wounds, and so forth. I can say that I place my sanctity at her disposal, knowing that she wants nothing other than what I want. On the other hand, one who thinks about sanctifying only herself lives at the expense of her sanctity, of her strength, of her love. Oh, how miserable shall she grow! She shall feel all the weight of her misery, and shall live in continuous struggle with herself. Instead, for the one who lives at the expense of my sanctity, her path shall flow placid. She shall live in peace with herself and with me. I shall watch over her thoughts and each fiber of her heart, and I shall be jealous that not even one fiber may not ask for souls, and her being may be in continuous pouring of itself into me, to repair me. Don't you yourself feel this jealousy of mine? You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 12, Part 7. Fiat.